were and still are hungry for spiritual meaning in their lives, and you know, what is the deeper meaning with life? What happens when we die? You know, is there an afterlife? All those things people are hungry for. So to finish the story, between 2002 and up to current time, we started branding our events as Celebrate Your Life events, and we do conferences, we do small retreats, we do women's summits, we do online programs, we do something for everyone who is really looking to expand their world, understanding and knowing that there's something more.
The two biggest questions from my perspective in life: why are we here and what happens after we die? Well, we examine near-death experiencers' accounts from all over the world, men and women, and their fascinating trips across the veil. We appreciate you joining us here on the channel, and don't forget, when you're done, if you wouldn't mind, to like, share, and subscribe, and leave us your comments. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of What's Death Got to Do With It, our podcast here on the Near Death Network. We talk to experiencers who have experienced near death, along with academicians and clinicians, and people just in and around the field to redefine death as not being finite. It's an extension of consciousness, and we want to just enable people to understand that with the body of work that all of these individuals are doing collectively, that that's the case. And joining me now, grabbing a little sip before we get going here, Liz Dawn Donahue. Thank you so much for joining us. We've known each other, gosh, we got to go back to you're like 32 years old. You're Celebrate Your Life organization.
Well, I'm not
right?
32 years old, but we started the company about 31 years ago in 1995. June 13th, 1995 was our first event.
And
Can't believe
let's go back just to give people a foundation of how this began for you and your mother, who we all miss, but I know she's with us in spirit today. How did this come about? How did your organization to highlight spiritual authors and workshops and that type of thing come together?
Okay, so first of all, the name of our company is Mishka Productions, and Mishka, my mouse pad happens to be Mishka. Mishka was our family dog.
Oh, how cute.
And we're branded and we're well known for Celebrate Your Life events. And so, this is such a funny, weird story. But making a long story short, hopefully, although you know I can talk, Mark, I was living in Los Angeles, and my life just kind of splatted, and I was exhausted, and I was a regional theater actress and traveling. My mom said to me, why don't you come home for a little bit? So home at that point was Scottsdale. So that's where she was living, in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I came back, didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And a friend of hers had a opening in a spiritual bookstore. And we've always been into all things spiritual. My mom was reading Ram Dass, and she gave me the book when I was like 16. And my mom was woo-woo and doing psychic readings and reading auras and all those kinds of weird things back in the 70s that nobody talked about, right? And so fast forward, I went to work in the bookstore, and the woman knew that I had event experience. When I lived in Los Angeles, I was an activities director and / kind of making a career as an actress, but not really in Los Angeles. And so I went to work in the bookstore, and the woman said to me, there's this really great book that's coming out. This man handed it to me from the trunk of his car. I think it's going to be a huge hit. I'd like for you to do the event. I said, okay. So I went home, I read the book overnight, came back, and I said, yes. So I did the event, standing room only. We had about 1,600 people. People were begging me to get into the door. The book was The Celestine Prophecy that broke publishing industry records. It was on the New York Times bestseller list, either from number 1 to 3 on the New York Times bestseller list for over 3 years. And we did that event. Then his wife, James Redfield's wife, who is the author of The Celestine Prophecy, his wife then published her own material with Time Warner at the time, who was doing a lot of the spiritual books. And she said to me, would you please do an event with me? And by that time, I'd already left the bookstore and I was onto something else. And I said, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do that on my own. And I'm about to move back to LA. And she said, no, 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 do this on your own. Please, please do this for me. So I turned to my mom and I said, well, Sally Redfield wants us to do an event. And my mom said, well, I'll loan you $1,500. We'll set up a phone line and let's do the event. You can go rent space. I said, okay, great. So I picked up the phone to place an ad in our local newspaper. And the man said to me, what's the name of your company? And I said, company? What are you talking about? Company? So I hung up and I said, Mom, we need a name for the company. And so my last name is Dawn, and everybody kept saying New Dawn Productions and Dawn this. And I was like, no, 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 no. And we had just lost our family dog, Mishka. And I said, well, let's just call it Mishka Productions. That was 31 years ago, 30 years ago. And that's how Mishka Productions was born. And then from that event with Sally Redfield, it was sold out, standing room only. Now we're talking 1995. Someone introduced me to Carlos Castaneda. Carlos Castaneda had never, ever, ever done public appearances. No one ever knew what he looked like. He was a huge New York Times bestselling author. And I went and pitched them to do an event. I had no idea what I was doing. It was like this, oh, can we do an event? Right? I was this 30-something-year-old, kid. And they said yes for one of Carlos's first ever, in-person appearance. And here I was, this novice. So again, we did the event, standing room only. And then by that point, we'd done a couple of events after that. And then my mom turned to me, said, maybe we should partner. I said, yeah, I need a partner in this. So the two of us partnered together for many, many years until she transitioned into spirit. And we did one event a month until 2002. So we did one event a month and we kept getting introduced to people along the way. And I want to say it was 1997 when our office phone rang, and I'm still working like in a little tiny room in my apartment at this point. The office phone rang and it was this man. My mom picked up the phone and she said, it's Wayne Dyer. And I said, who is Wayne Dyer?
Yeah, you just happened. The first three that you booked were superstars. So it had to be your path.
I had no idea who Wayne Dyer was. She said, he's really, really big in personal development. And I said, okay. And he wanted to speak to someone who actually met Carlos. And at that point, I was the only one who met Carlos Castaneda. My mom hadn't met him yet. So I get on the phone and say, hi, this is Liz. How can I help you? He says, this is Wayne Dyer. And I've always wanted to meet Carlos Castaneda. And I want to come to your event in Seattle with Carlos. My wife and I want to be there. And I said, okay.
Yeah, sure.
I said, sure. Can I take your ticket order? I had no idea who I'm talking to. So that's how I met Wayne Dyer. And, it just gelled from there. So we did one event a month and we really, really put ourselves on the map through doing publicity. And it was really very local in the beginning because we had articles in the Arizona Republic. We had articles in all the other like little newspapers. And then we were featured and you were instrumental. I mean, when you were doing the sports news, but you were the spiritual guy doing the sport, you were instrumental for us because you introduced us to contacts at the stations you were working at and being able to get us on the news and talk about the events we were doing. And people were and still are hungry for spiritual meaning in their lives and what is the deeper meaning with life? What happens when we die? Is there an afterlife? All those things people are hungry for. So to finish the story, between 2002 and up to current time, we started branding our events as Celebrate Your Life events. And we do conferences, we do small retreats, we do women's summits, we do online programs. We do something for everyone who is really looking to expand their world, understanding and knowing that there's something more, that there's something more to life than just, making the almighty dollar, than worrying and stressing about all those things that we worry and stress about in life. And how do we open our lives up to something that gives us more purpose and meaning? So
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's the thrust of why we all do this, right? I mean, and we all have different roles. I mean, we're all in the play, and you can relate to this being the actress. And my daughter was a theater major, Erica, at ASU. So I get plenty of the theatrics, in our audience. And kind of what I did was basically say it's okay for men who are linear and sports fans to be open to this, because like you said, I think everyone's hungry for it. They almost need license or permission to go, but I've been to your events and they're fantastic. And there's a lot of men there. It's not just women.
yeah, well, we have an event coming up in January with Greg Braden, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who talks all about epigenetics. Greg Braden, who talks about the resiliency of our bodies and the human spirit. Dr. Sue Morter, who talks about, energetic consciousness, blending that. And then we also have Anita Moorjani, who discusses life, I guess, after near-death experiences,
Right.
and, life after death, if you will. And so what I've noticed with this particular program that we do, it's called Transcendence, because we're blending science and spirituality. It's that our male demographic has really opened up. It used to be where you'd come to our events and it was 90% female. And now it's a little bit more of a balance where men are starting to open up, because we're approaching it from a little bit of a left brain approach with the science, with Greg Braden's work, with
Right.
Dr. Sue's work, with Dr. Bruce's work. And Anita brings in that more heart space, as Dr. Sue does as well. I mean, they all do, but there's a different approach and different teachings that we all resonate with. Men are going to resonate differently than a woman will. So by blending these four teachers, it actually is the perfect marriage of spiritual teachers and science teachers. So we're supporting both men and women in the way we all learn and experience our lives and experience the world.
Well, and I think that's a great gift. And I often quote Anita on this show because her book, Dying to Be Me, is a seminal work, I think, in the business. I mean,
Yeah.
it is, her and Danny going around the world and opening up and giving people an opportunity to embrace her experience. Her particular metaphor that I like is, she says, people say, well, what is the other side like? Or what is it all about? And two things she says. One, she goes, when I was there, it's like going in the most large warehouse in the world with a pen light that's being here. You only see a slice or a sliver of what is really behind the curtain. But she says, if you go to let's say one of the most reputable museums in the world, and it has an ornate tapestry on the wall, if your face is right up against it, you can only see this 4 or 5 threads that connect there. But if you take a step back, every thread is inextricably linked to another. So that metaphor shows us, that we are a holographic universe, that consciousness does not dissipate. You're having academicians and clinicians confirm what your mission statement is altogether. Like you said, Greg Braden and some of the people who come in with the more linear approach scientifically to the all-encompassing approach, it gives men a license to adopt this. Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Exactly. And what I love about Anita's work is that I believe she softens the edges of grief for people. She really teaches in a way that has people, it gives them hope, and it gives them a better understanding of the dying process, of the death process, and what happens when we transition into spirit, and that we still can continue the conversations with our loved ones who have passed over. Something that she does and she does this at every event that we do, is she actually takes people through a very, very deep process where you're in this almost deep meditation, and she guides you through a process to be able to connect with your loved ones in spirit, to connect with that part of you, to open up your world, not just to this physical world, but actually open you up to the spirit world, to kind of go through that dying process and see what it feels like. and everyone comes out of it. It's like an hour-long experience, just in tears, and their hearts just cracked wide open, because the heart, and Greg talks about this so much, about the heart coherence, because the heart, we're learning now, really is the brain of the body and the emotions of the body. The heart, the gut, right? I remember Wayne Dyer used to say, it's the heart is really where it's at, and it's a million miles from here to here for some people, but it's only really about what, 20 inches. But for some people, it's a million miles. And what these teachers do, especially Anita and Sue and Bruce and Greg, they really teach us how to drop into that heart space instead of running around the world in anger or frustration or worry or stress. It's like, we've done that. We've done that enough. We know how to do that, right?
Well, and see, and what I like about what you do is your speakers give a primer, what we're trying to do here as well, for how can I empower myself in my life. These are lofty concepts, but give me the how-tos, and that's what you do. In fact, Anita, I think when she meets her father on the other side, who she says she had kind of a fragmented relationship with here, it was all about love, and it really helped her heal that part of herself, which a lot of us go through. Maybe we had a contentious relationship with a parent or a spouse, and it was all just part of the drama of the roles we selected here, right? Don't take it personally, but that's tough to do when you don't have something to relate to. And I think Anita, Dannion does that very well as well.
Yeah, and Dannion definitely has more of that yawn, more of that male voice to be able to express that. And then Anita comes from a softer, a different approach, teaching people how to open up their hearts. The one thing I love about our events is that there are a lot of tools that people can take home and utilize in their daily lives. But here's the key. Here's the key, Mark, is that coming to an event is beautiful, and people get into the zone and they're all like, whoa, they can feel it. They're connected to spirit. They're connected to the other people. We create a really, really bonded, supportive, loving community at our events where you can have thought-provoking conversations. But the key is, there's a but here, or let me say there's an and here. And the key is to keep supporting yourself in everyday life. So it's not just about landing at a Celebrate Your Life event where you learn all of these things. It's continuing the journey. It's whether it's coming back to another program that we're doing, because they're beautiful reminders of landing into the truth of who you are. I mean, no one walks away from Celebrate Your Life event and said, oh, that was shitty.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen.
No,
I don't know if I just said that, but I just said it.
No,
but the key is to take, it's just like exercising any muscle that we have, right?
Yes.
We want to get stronger, so we go out and we work out. We want to learn how to play the piano, so we practice. We want to learn how to embody these principles. Then we take 10, 15 minutes every single day, and we utilize these skills, and the tools that we learn to be able to keep us grounded, to be able to keep us centered. It's just like anything else. It's a muscle that we develop. And if we love ourselves enough, if we really, really, really want to delve into loving ourselves and self-care, we take the time to do it every morning.
Right.
Every day.
Well, and one of our, panelists, Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, who himself was a clinical doctor, but a metaphysician, has his own spiritual practice now, says, I head into the day, how can I serve? That's how can I serve? But see, and what you said was very important. How can I serve myself? We look at that as almost being contrary. No, that's ego-based. No, it's not. If you don't serve yourself appropriately and love yourself and extend that love into the arena that you go into, then you're not 100%, I think, just genuine, right? So those tools that you teach.
Right, but it's also how you show up for your community. So if I start my day in a way that is honoring to my soul, that is calm, that is centered, that is bringing into the truth of who I am, that I'm really doing my breathing, exercising, and my centering, and really in a space of gratitude, right? Gratitude is the attitude.
Yes, sir.
And so
yes,
I'm going out in the world, right? I'm going out in the world, I'm actually being of service by loving myself, by self-care, by honoring myself. I'm being of service because everyone then I interact with is in a more centered, is in a more loving, is in a more kind, compassionate way. And we never know that kind word or that smile that might be just that thing that might heal or give someone just what they needed in that day. Maybe someone needed a kind word, they're having a lousy morning, and we come in, in that sense of gratitude, in loving ourselves, and we're embodying that energy, right?
Right.
And
So
contagious. It's contagious. That's what it is.
it's a practical application of the actual premise. However, like you said, that connection is fostered by intent, by the intent too, with self
Right.
and with others. So if we could just kind of circle back to the nexus of this program, which is the near-death experience and the life reviews, which you just kind of articulated, and that all those touch points that we have with individuals in the course of a day come back and we're reviewing this and went, oh man, I shouldn't have said that to that person. Or I did something I thought was benign, but it really turned their life around. That's what you're talking about in the process. How have people like Anita and Dannion and people in the near-death community fostered maybe a change editorially in your perception of how life is relative to the life review that you just talked about?
Okay, so I'm not sure I understand that question, but I think I do.
Well, just for example, every individual action we have in our life is chronicled on our soul's hard drive, right? People like Dannion and Anita talk about this, and you kind of glossed over it when you were talking about how we approach people, how we approach self and others. So isn't it
Uh-huh.
really incumbent upon us to be consciously aware of how we interact with everyone?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I think that's just for, where you are in your evolution. If you are truly wanting to be that kind, compassionate, joyful person in the world and kind person, you could go out there and fake it till you make it. And, I'm not sure. So I know that Dannion's theory is that, so I'm going to be a little controversial here, that there is this, intense life review and everything you've done wrong and all those things. I kind of feel like I'm not so sure I agree or disagree with it wholly, because I do believe that, yes, we're going to screw up. I mean, I screw up all the time. And it's not really what I do or what happens, it's how I handle it after the fact. So let me give you a for instance. So let's say my husband Jeff and I are having an argument and I say something really lousy and I catch myself and I'm like, oh man, I'm so, so, so sorry. I apologize. And then the key is for me, for this one, is to change my behavior based on, so it's not just catching ourselves and apologizing and saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, but it's also making changes from within. And that's the hard part. I think that's the hard part. And Dannion talks about how he was, a soldier and he was kind of a not nice person. I was going to use a different word, but I don't think I can use that
Yeah,
here.
he was basically a paid assassin. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
that's what he did. And
yeah. But he
he
was also
talks
kind of,
about that openly.
yeah, and how he wasn't the nicest person in the world. And so it's him being able to make amends and being able to shift that. And in his life review, he felt all the pain. He felt, if it's true that we do have a life review, well, I'm going to have some painful moments because I've done some painful things to people. I've said painful things. I have not been the nicest human at all times. I mean, let's face it. So I think we've all had that experience. And so I feel that being the best you can be and taking responsibility for the energy that you bring into a space moving forward from this point forward is crucial. Being responsible for the energy that you bring into a space. And that was Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, who learned that during her stroke of insight and her near-death experience. So,
Well,
so
I agree with
moving
you.
forward, yeah,
I think it's not so much, we don't want to see it as judgment. That's typically how people would characterize
right,
our mistakes. So, like you said, the quicker you can make amends and correct it, if you can do it instantaneously, so much the better. But like you said, you don't have to go back to everyone you offended in your life and to be absolved of that. But it is critical in a component of education. I think a lot of these people who have these near-death experiences and the life reviews go, wow, I could be more covetous of how I interact with people on a daily basis.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's so important. I mean, if you think about, like, have you ever been in a room and somebody walks in and they're really mad, and they're really mad that they got overcharged on something, or something funny happens like that, right? And then you go, yeah, you have to go get them. That's like ridiculous. This is mobism, by the way. And this is when we get stuck in the amygdala, that part of our brain. Yeah, no, no, no. Yeah. And then the next person comes in. Yeah, 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 yeah. You see it in the United States right now, actually all over the world with these protests, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, 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 right? And everybody's like building upon that energy that explodes. But what happens when someone walks into a room and they're embodying peace, and they're embodying truth, and they're embodying a higher level of consciousness? And we walk in and we say, you know, something that's I've been challenged with is this. Something I've been challenged with is this. When you're having challenges, it's learning
Right.
how to approach it in a different way, right? Approaching it in a different way of, I'm having challenges here. What do you all think about that? It's coming in a state of groundedness, of peace, and not allowing the amygdala, that part of our brain that grabs onto anger, that grabs onto stress, and that we get addicted to. Yeah, 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 yeah. We all know that. It's the
Right.
addiction of those hormones, right?
And it becomes a
Present
pack
company,
mentality after a
guilty and
while.
included, right? And it's learning how to control that. It's learning how to step into that. Oh, wait a minute. I hear this person is really, really angry about this. I really hear this person is so stressed about this. How can I serve right now? What is in my highest good to be able to, maybe let's diffuse this. Let's calm down. This just happened to me the other day. It was a silly HOA issue. And this man has been just gossiping about me and beating me up and da 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 da. And I was in a meeting with him and two other men that were there. And I turned and said, how can we diffuse this? What do you need right now? What do you need from me right now? Tell me. And it shut him up, and it made him think. And I could actually see, because I've known this man for 26 years, and I could actually see almost tears in his eyes. And the two other men just got quiet. And one of them said, how can we move past this? He chimed in, because this man who was angry kept saying, but you did this, but you did that. And I'm like, that's your perception. I understand that. I really hear you. But tell me what you need from me right now to create peace.
That's a
And it
great,
diffused it. And we shook hands and we even hugged.
well, and see, and it takes someone to initiate that behavior. You know, the spiritual discipline I've been in, they always say the burden is on the understander. It's not, and it's not always fun to be the understander, right? You don't want to necessarily, sit and diffuse that, but you know that the mechanics of that will initiate a response like you got. So it takes spiritual maturity to do that,
Well,
you know.
it's not just spiritual maturity. And when you say it's not always easy, it actually is easier than you think, because the outcome and the outcome, I can't say the outcome's always going to be fantastic, but in that particular situation, I was really, really proud of myself that I didn't get stuck in my amygdala and that anger place, because I could have easily done that. The hormones start, running rampant. Right. And it gets back to, and I know we've sort of done this weird pathway back to the near death experience and about what happens when we die and the life review. But this is kind of all part of it, because this is like the story of our lives, right? This is life. And so when we transition and when we have that life review, right, we're going to see, wow, Mark did his best in this situation. I really did my best here. Didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, but I really did my best. I worked on staying grounded. I worked on bringing spiritual messages to the world and more peace to the world and more understanding. Right?
No, I think that's a beautiful way to really put a bow on this, and I appreciate your time and for putting up with our technical difficulties at the outset of this. I think that's all part of just life today.
Yeah.
How can people get a hold of your organization? What's your website? We'll put it in the show notes too, but
Super
how can
easy.
they get a hold of you guys?
It's celebrateyourlife.com. Celebrateyourlife.com. There you go.
That's pretty simple. And if they
Yes.
want to reach out, do you guys have a contact page on the website?
Yeah, we have
Okay.
everything. Our phone numbers all over the place, our contact page. We make sure that it's super easy. You have questions, call us. We love getting phone calls. Everybody
Perfect.
emails nowadays. You can pick up and talk to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, listen, you've done a remarkable job. You have a great staff, and you never fail to impress with your lineup. And I think it's a testament to you and your genuineness and your husband's to be able to really be so, and I hate to keep using genuine, but authentic. I think those of us who take steps into this pool in a linear world sometimes are looked at sideways. But like you said earlier, more and more people are open and amenable to seeing these concepts and integrating them into their lives. And so thanks for everything you do, Liz, and thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.